And we're back here in the studio of WECS, 17 minutes past 7 o'clock. And with me tonight, we have Ed Munster, who's running for the House of Representatives? U.S. Congress.
Yes, that's right.
Can you just move that a little bit closer, maybe?
Heard here now?
Oh, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, but that's okay. We'll be back after this public service announcement.
Don't answer a help wanted ad, answer a help needed ad. From Chile to the Czech Republic and Thailand to Tanzania, Peace Corps invites you to make a difference and build your resume at the same time. If you will have a degree in education, agriculture, forestry, health, math, science, or TEFL, you are needed. Call Peace Corps at 800-424-8580. That's Peace Corps, 800-424-8580.
Okay,
Okay. Are we on here?
that's working, yeah.
Okay.
We didn't want a professional announcer for this commercial because we're trying to save the earth. Don't get me wrong, having a professional announcer would be great, but that would have taken a big casting session with people driving from all over to get here, wasting a lot of gas and adding to the pollution. And the way we see it, if our commercial isn't kind to the earth, how can we ask you to be? Use cloth shopping bags, buy recycled paper products, switch to energy-saving light bulbs. Yeah, maybe they're little steps, but one little step leads to another, and pretty soon they're big steps. Look, I can't tug at your heartstrings or really lay it on thick like a real announcer, but I am taking the bus home. So maybe that'll help make up for it. Call EarthShare, 1-800-488-8887. This message was brought to you by EarthShare and the Ad Council.
And WECS, and we've, okay. Strange things are happening in the studio tonight, but that's okay. Okay, once again, I'd like to welcome Ed Munster, who's running for Congress, the U.S. Congress. Could you tell us a little bit, a brief history about your political career?
Okay, yes. I got involved originally in running for public office back in the mid-'70s. My children were all in grade school at the time, and the Republicans in my town asked me if I would run for office for the Board of Education. It sounded like something that was important to me.
Couldn't find anybody else to do it?
That's about it. They couldn't find anybody else to do it almost. And they said, well, we're looking for someone who's, got an interest in the school systems, got young children, and will also be interested in helping to try to control cost and make sure that we get the best value we can for our dollar. And so I ran for it, and I surprised everybody by getting myself elected to the Board of Education, because no Republican had been elected in our town for many a year, and because we were outnumbered in that town considerably. And so it started out that way. I enjoyed it, and ended up getting involved in, for example, the Republican Town Committee after that, because I felt that it was really important that we get good people involved at all levels of government. Otherwise, if you don't have any competition for the offices, you can imagine that if you got one-party control, things go downhill.
Right.
And so we managed to make it very competitive and elect a lot of Republicans over the next several years.
They all followed you.
Well, I became town chairman and sort of enjoyed that aspect of being involved in politics, helping to get other people involved. And after my children were all in school, going now through high school and that, and basically they were all either in college, or the youngest one was still in high school at the time. I decided to run for state senate because there was an opening in the state senate. A fellow who had been in the state senate decided not to run for re-election, so I ran for and was elected to the state senate from the 33rd senatorial district, which is basically the Connecticut River Valley. So I enjoyed. I was in the state senate. I was on the education committee, which is appropriate for a guy like myself, who had been involved in the education department and the board of education in our system at home. and I served on the appropriations and the banking committees as well in the state Senate. Then 2 years later, the Republicans were looking for someone to run for the U.S. Congress in 1992. And I decided to throw my hat into that ring, and lo and behold, after a very exciting convention and a primary, I won the primary and was the Republican nominee for U.S. Congress in 1992. We had no money. We were broke, as a matter of fact. After the primary, we were in debt, and all we had, what we did have, was tremendous. We had a lot of volunteers who got involved in our campaign.
That helps, yeah.
And so I ran a race 2 years ago with about 400 or 500 volunteers and throughout this district, and lots of shoe leather, and we didn't do a single mailing to the entire district because we couldn't afford the postage.
Wow.
We only advertised on cable TV because we couldn't possibly afford the rates on broadcast TV.
Yeah.
And we surprised a lot of people, both here in Connecticut and in Washington, because on election night we got 49.2% of the vote. I beat Congressman Sam Gejdenson in his own hometown of Basra.
Wow.
Okay.
Tells you something there.
Yeah, I won in 36 of the 54 towns.
Wow, that's very good.
But we did end up coming up 0.8% short, which is, second place doesn't pay, and doesn't do any good in this game. So I went back to work and at my job at Pfizer, where I'm a research statistician, and worked there right up until the end of 1993, when I retired because I had determined that I was going to run again in '94. And here we are. I announced in January, and we've been out campaigning ever since. I received the Republican nomination, which was that was unexpected. No one, that's not a surprise. And we're running a very strong campaign this year, and everyone is getting, all the volunteers that we had 2 years ago are getting very active in this campaign as well, and we're excited about the prospects for a solid victory this time, not a close call, but a solid victory.
Have you had the primaries already, the Republican primaries?
Well, there won't be a Republican primary this year. You may be familiar with the Connecticut system for selecting candidates. What it amounts to is that to run in a primary, one qualifies by getting at least 15% of the vote at the convention. Well, I had no opposition at the convention, so I have no one to run against me in the primary. So basically, at this point, I am the Republican candidate. There will not be a Republican challenger in a primary.
Why should there be one? Like you came so close last time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's basically it. If many times there isn't a need for a primary. When I ran 2 years ago, when we had a primary, the convention was almost like 50-50. I mean, I had 47% of the vote, and the other guy had like 53% of the vote, 51%, and we had someone else who had 4% of the vote. So it was absolutely very, very close, and we ended up going through the primary process, and I won the primary, and we then got into this really interesting campaign 2 years ago, where we ran a campaign with no money. Basically, we only spent $95,000 in the general election, while my opponent, Sam Gejdenson, was spending $1,023,000.
It's pocket change for him.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about it is, he's the congressman who proposes campaign finance reform. He puts a bill out there before the Congress which says that he wants to limit campaign spending to $600,000. But when he found out that he was in trouble, when he realized that this guy who was not expected to do anything, all of a sudden was right on his heels, he started pouring money into the campaign, and he ended up spending over $1 million, in spite of the fact that he had this campaign finance reform bill, which would have limited him to $600,000 in spending.
I think I know what took up all that money too. It's all those potholders.
Now, we've had a lot of fun with the potholders. I don't know. One of the things about a campaign is that you've got some very serious issues, and we care about the issues, and we're trying to get our message out to people. But at the same time, folks enjoy a little bit of humor from time to time. And this year we have a T-shirt that reads on one side, my congressman went to Washington, and all I got was a lousy potholder. On the other side of the shirt, it says, "Don't get burned again. Vote for Ed Munster for Congress."
Oh, that's cute. That's catchy. That'll
Yeah.
get into people's memories. Why do you feel it was so close the last time of the election? Because he was more well known, or
Well, certainly he had the advantage of the incumbency. He had the advantage of the franking privilege. Franking privilege is really the free mail that he gets from the federal government to send out to people. And if you have opened your mailbox anytime recently, you probably have gotten within the last month at least 2 pieces of mail from the congressman. Now, if you figure that there are about 300,000 households in eastern Connecticut, at if I were to send out a mailing to each one of those households at the bulk mail permit rate, it would cost me 16.5 cents. That's at 300,000 of those. That's almost $50,000 in postage.
Wow.
Okay, and he sends out these on a regular basis. Everybody's. I mean, in the last month, I think there's been at least 2 and maybe 3 mailings, and he does this month after month, and he's in fact has the highest franking bill in all of New England. So I'm campaigning against a guy who's using your tax dollars to send you his political message, and that's the disadvantage that you have when you're running against an incumbent. That's why it's so difficult to beat an incumbent who's in the U.S. Congress. We came extremely close. Why did we come close? Because I think people were beginning to catch on that you had a guy in the Congress who was really not out there protecting their jobs, helping to create new jobs for them and their children. In fact, I would say that that's my primary motivation for wanting to be involved in the U.S. Congress, is because I looked out there and I saw that the kids who were getting out of college or out of high school and trying to join the workforce did not have anywhere near the opportunities that people of my generation had when we got involved in the workforce.
That's true. They say that each generation is supposed to do better than their parents. But our generation, my generation, is like the first one where we're doing worse off.
Yeah, and it's not that you're not working or trying any harder, because you are. I mean, I know people who are holding down 2 or 3 jobs in order to try to make a living. I know people who have graduated from engineering schools with the highest qualifications. I mean, top of the class students who it took them 2 years to get a job. In the meantime, they were working at fast food stores, handing out burgers or pizzas in order to pay their rent, or to find a way to get a little bit of an income until they got a job in their field that they were trained for.
It's really sad, because I see that a lot too. It's like they spend all this money. You're told when you're a kid that, you go to college and you're going to be something, But then all of my friends right now, they've just graduated from college and they're not doing anything. It's not that they don't want to. They're trying.
Yeah, there just aren't the jobs out there.
Right.
It's interesting that Connecticut is on a per capita basis considered to be the richest state in the nation. We're number 1 on per capita income. However, Eastern Connecticut, okay. If you take the per capita income for the entire state of Connecticut, it's like $28,200 per person. On the other hand, if you look at Eastern Connecticut, the 2nd Congressional District, we're down at $16,900. That's the equivalent of a South Carolina or Louisiana or Mississippi. We're like the worst, the lowest 10 income states in the nation. Wow. here in Eastern Connecticut. And that difference between the prosperity of other areas in our state compared to the poverty, if you will, of Eastern Connecticut is what I say is the record of the present congressman. This guy has failed when it comes to providing jobs for the people in this district. He's failed to protect the existing jobs. I give you the example of he refuses to serve on the House Armed Services Committee where he could protect defense jobs. He is supportive of something called the McDermott Bill for health care, which would be a national socialized medicine type health care system. That would put 20,000 people in the health insurance industry out of work. Now, we can't afford to lose that number of jobs in that industry, and it would create, in effect, a government-run bureaucracy for healthcare, where some government clerk, bureaucrat would make decisions about what is going to be treatment for any disease that you might have or problem that you might have as you go to see a doctor. The patient-doctor relationship with respect to making decisions about health care would get lost in such a facility, in such a program.
And all the paperwork and can you just give us the basics of what your responsibilities would be if you become a congressman?
Okay. One of the things that first of all, I take as my highest priority the creation of jobs in the private sector for people in my district. In other words, I would look at any projects that I could help with to try to produce the jobs that are necessary, that are needed in this district, because I think that's the top priority issue. I've given some examples of that already to people. I have what I call a jobs package. That includes, for example, there was a proposal at the University of Connecticut to have a technology park, a Connecticut technology park. And what the idea here is that, and these were proposed at all universities in the Northeast between 1981 and 1986. The one in Connecticut was authorized in 1983. At the same time that at least another dozen were authorized around the Northeast. For example, right down in New Haven at Yale, there was a science park created. There's been about 1,200 jobs created as a result of that, and 40 new businesses in high-tech industries, which have created some some good-paying jobs. Now, that's an example here in Connecticut. In Worcester, Mass, there's one of these. At MIT, there's one. At Rensselaer, there's one. All throughout the Northeast, we have examples of these same kinds of technology parks. Now, the idea here is, what you'd like to do is to get, if you will, the brilliant ideas, from the university classroom, transferred, if you will, to the factory floor, where the industries in your area could benefit from the technology that's being developed in the university, so that you're not just simply developing ideas in a vacuum. You're really developing ideas that have an application in the real world, creating jobs for people in the area.
That's great.
Now, what happens in technology parks is that in many cases, what you'd like to have is businesses who might exist in your state to establish a research office there, in the park, right adjacent to the university. These people would, the university professors and graduate students would also have offices in this same building. They would collaborate on projects together in terms of doing the research necessary for solving any problem that industry might have. There would be an arrangement made by which the faculty members and the graduate students would work with business to solve their problems. The university would benefit from the fees paid for that kind of service, might even benefit from royalties that might be developed out of ideas. And there would be spin-off jobs as these businesses then are able to go into production and actually produce a product, hire people, and go off and do whatever it is that they're doing, and create jobs. And these are going to be, by the nature of the type of project we're talking about, relatively high-paying jobs, and benefit the area in question. So this is what we needed at the University of Connecticut. It was authorized in 1983, and since 1983, what we have to show for it is a 2,000-foot blacktop road going off into the woods of Mansfield.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay, at the end of that road, the university has been storing a bunch of dumpsters, and that's what we got to show for 11 years of progress. or lack thereof.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, you should have a convention center there. You should have a hotel convention center where academic meetings would be held, where business meetings would be held, where the academicians and the business people would be getting together, exchanging ideas. That's what these parks are meant to do.
Yeah.
And
It's a very good idea because the students would benefit because they'd be able to use their knowledge and use their experiments right there in the business. The business representatives will be there watching them, and then
they'd be working hand in hand
Wow.
with the business people. And it's an idea that's worked well, and we've had thousands of jobs created in the Northeast as a result of this kind of relationship. And we ought to have that same thing happening here. Other parks that were established in the same time period are flourishing, and ours has nothing to show. Now, I say, as your congressman, one of the things that I want to do is, first of all, I want to be on the board of directors of the Connecticut Educational Properties Incorporated, which is called UCEPI, University of Connecticut, UCEPI, University of Connecticut Educational Properties Incorporated. And let's get this project rolling. Let's find out what the problems are, move it along, because 11 years is too long for us to sit there with nothing happening.
Yeah. Are there any other subcommittees that you would like to join?
Well, for example, I want to be on the House Home Services Committee. Eastern Connecticut represents one of the highest per capita defense spending. In other words, the federal government was spending more money per capita in Eastern Connecticut than almost any other district in the entire United States. I mean, we were right up there in the top, but we continue to lose more and more jobs in the defense industry. I believe it was a real mistake for our congressman, who's been in the Congress now for 14 years, not to be on that committee. The representatives from Virginia, for example, there are 3 members from the House, and both of their senators have been on that committee, the Senate and the House Armed Services Committee I'm speaking of. And our congressman, had he been on that committee since the beginning of his tenure, would have he'd be one of the top-ranking, highest seniority people. Seniority in the Congress, remember, is a function of which committee you're on. As you go to if he were to join a committee now, his seniority would start now. So the fact that he may have 14 years worth of seniority on the House Administration Committee, remember that he's got quite a bit of seniority on the House Administration Committee. But what does that do for Eastern Connecticut? 0. Yeah. Now, what's the House Administration Committee? Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's the committee that oversees the House Bank. You remember the 51 bounce checks from 2 years ago?
Oh yeah.
Okay. It has oversight over the House Post Office. Okay, where there's a scandal going on, and Rostenkowski was just indicted. Okay, our congressman bounced 51 checks 2 years ago, and for $21,000. If you did that, you might end up in jail.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, he since then he's voted at least twice to not have an investigation of the House Post Office scandal, and since then there's been this indictment of Rostenkowski. Instead of basically trying to bring up the integrity, increase the integrity of the U.S. Congress, what we've had is a continuing deterioration of people's view of Congress because of the fact that the sleazy practices that have been going on in the Congress with respect to the House Bank and the House Post Office. And this thing has been perpetuated. So the guy's on a committee, and instead of standing up and saying, look, these are the kinds of things that have to be straightened out and we've got to investigate and just get rid of the kind of problems that we've got so we can build people's confidence in the Congress, instead we've had just the opposite.
I'd like to touch again on the defense industry. Like Pratt and Whitney is in East Hartford. That would be part of this district, right?
It's not in this second congressional district,
not.
but a lot of the people who work or who used to work at the Pratt & Whitney plant did live in this district. So, in fact, it does impact us tremendously.
And we have EB, electric boat.
Electric boat down in Groton.
Is there anything being done now, or is there anything you would like to do to, like, maybe convert these defense industries into maybe a commercial producing?
Well, there's two ways to think about this. One is there a product that a place like EB or Pratt & Whitney could manufacture that would be saleable on the commercial, to normal consumers rather than the federal government as a consumer of defense instruments, guns, submarines, or whatever. And the other approach is to say, well, we recognize that there's going to be some problems facing us. We've basically, it was through the buildup of the defenses of this country, or through the Department of Defense, that in fact we won the Cold War, that the Berlin Wall came down. No question in my mind that it was the Reagan buildup that caused that to happen. Now we're looking at a situation in which we see that maybe we aren't going to need as much in the way of defenses, or we can somehow relax and not do quite as much spending as we have been in the past on defense. No problem. I understand that. What else can we do? Instead, one thing is to try to get some of these industries to convert and do something different. The other is, let's try to do some things in the economy that will cause existing businesses to try to be more successful in terms of selling their products overseas. So, in other words, get your eggs out of the defense basket into some other basket.
Right.
And so, for example, I proposed that we should have a port authority down in New London. I'd like to see this port authority run by the private sector. Get a management company in there which can run that port authority. First of all, we need about $30 million to actually to rebuild the docks and the facilities there, because they've been allowed to go into neglect over the last probably 8-10 years. And now let's talk about shipping product overseas, because if we can sell, if you've got a manufacturing company here in the Windham area that is going to be that has product that could be sold overseas, and they can sell to France or Germany or Italy or any place overseas. If they can sell some of their product overseas, that means they're going to have to hire more people to produce more product as they're selling more product. And then, if we can demonstrate that companies that exist here in Eastern Connecticut can in fact thrive and can grow and employ more people, then only will we have people looking at this area and say, wait a minute, you do have some skilled people here who live here. In fact, they've been known for the kind of skilled labor that is necessary in order to do the kind of high-tech manufacturing that's necessary in today's world. And so then you start attracting people to this area. If you consider, for example, and that's the reason I'm interested in this technology park at the University of Connecticut. If you consider what's going on down in North Carolina, where you've got the Research Triangle, and how much business is moving into North Carolina, and basically because of the technology and the growth that is happening in that area of the country. When people see success, they say, well, maybe that's where I want to be, because that's where things are successful. So we've got to help existing businesses to create new jobs for people in our area. When we see that happening, when others see that happening, they will look at this area and say, there's something here, we can partake of it, part of that success ourselves. And then you get, basically it'll build on itself. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I noticed in the paper the other day, I saw a little news brief on, they were saying that all these defense industries like EB or whatever, just for example, 75% of the $20 billion in third world arms market is supplied by the U.S. So basically, is there anything that we could done to avoid selling arms and like military equipment to countries like Iraq, like what happened before. Basically, we built up
Yeah.
Iraq, and then we ended up fighting them later
Exactly.
on.
Yeah. In fact, that's there's a bill called Export Administration Act, which is up for reauthorization, and the major bone of contention that I have, that bill is coming out of a subcommittee that Mr. Gagenson chairs. Okay, and the major bone of contention that I have over this is that what had happened in the past was that there was a lot of technology that the United States put off limits. We could not sell. In other words, if you were a manufacturer and you created certain technologies, let's say it was some sophisticated computer technology that could be used for some peaceful purpose, or it could be used to target a missile at some target or something.
Right.
Okay, that is called dual-use technology. Dual-use technology. In order to export it, you had to have a special license, and you had to assure that it was being sold to friendly nations that were going to use it for the purposes that were not military. Now, what happens is that Mr. Gagenson has proposed a piece of legislation which would remove some of those restrictions so that it could be sold to other countries. There was a big concern that we want to be careful not to allow such technology to be sold to places like Iraq, Iran, North Korea, and those are called, we basically refer to those as rogue nations. People, you never know what they're going to do.
Right.
So it turned out that I basically put out a press release some time ago criticizing that proposal because I was concerned about whether, in fact, we might end up having to fight some country again who would be using our own technology.
Yeah, it's scary because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, why should someone be profiting by selling arms to both sides of a war, or a potential arms buildup, which could lead to a war? So the bill that Mr. Gagenson is proposing would put the U.S. Commerce Department in charge of making a decision about whether something could be sold to such a nation as North Korea. The people who are on the Armed Services Committee believe that it should be the Department of Defense which makes that decision. Now, I mean, it's I asked the question: would you trust the Department of Defense to be in a better position to make that decision, or the Department of Commerce? That's the hang-up. That's the sticky point that is holding up this Export Administration Bill reauthorization. And there are many of us who contend that it should be the Department of Defense.
Because it can be very scary to just think about, with all the trouble that the defense industries are going through because of the defense cuts. Some people are saying, "Oh, the solution is if we can't sell the arms to our own armies, how about selling to other armies?" But
Doesn't make sense.
That's very scary. Yeah. Okay. Let's touch again on education. And you were on the Board of Education, you said?
I was on the Board of Education in my hometown of Haddam, serving on the Regional District Board, and I also served on the Education Committee for the State Senate, State Legislature.
So this would be a good question to ask you then. It seems that the educational standards in all levels have dropped severely. What can be done to keep kids in school, adults keep it affordable for adults to attend college, and improve the quality of their education?
Well, certainly one of the things that, I think education is an ongoing process. In other words, we never, in reality, ever stop learning.
Right.
And people who are, truly, involved in activities which require them to be on top of the latest developments in their field are always going to seminars, maybe even taking coursework at the universities. And so it's important to encourage uh, continuing education. One of the things that I would say that I was interested in seeing happen here in Connecticut was that we have a system for at the university and college level, which allowed people who maybe could not afford directly to go to, say, Eastern or the University of Connecticut, to attend a community college, pick up the first 2 years of college basically by maybe living at home and going to community college, and then when they wanted to specialize, because most of the time you're taking fairly standard courses in your first 2 years of college.
Right.
When you're ready to basically pick out your major and specialize, then you go to a university like Eastern or University of Connecticut and finish your college program. The problem that we had here in Connecticut was that many times after spending 2 years at a community college, you then try to transfer to a university, you lose a lot of the credits, even though it's all state schools. So one of my concerns was it costs people money, it costs them time. And so one of my concerns was, let's make sure that the courses that are offered, I mean, if we got all one system, we're all paying for it as taxpayers, let's make sure that as you go from one school system, basically from the community college to Eastern, or to the Connecticut State University system, which is what Eastern is a part of, or to the University of Connecticut, that you have easy transferability of courses, of all courses, so that they're all qualify for transfer.
It would make sense because basically a community college would teach a course on math. I mean, you're basically learning the same thing you're going to learn at a university.
Yeah, and it ought to be, and the standards ought to be the same, so that as you move from one school to the other, you can transfer your credits without fear of losing them. Now, I think that was, that's an important aspect of trying to make it less expensive and make it easier for people to get, the solid kind of college education that they'd like to be able to have, and make it convenient for them, because many times people are, maybe working part-time, and they can pick up some of their courses at different places, so they might be able to, pick up a course at Manchester Community College, and also at maybe Middlesex Community College, or Quinnebog, or wherever, and so that's where it's important to be able to take their courses and be able to get all their credits transferred as they move into a specialization area.
Right. Do you agree with any of the programs that Clinton has set up, like maybe setting up certain programs to help assist people with finance in return for community service?
Well, I think the idea of that is certainly a good idea with respect to helping, if you're talking about education now, financing education?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. You have people who might want to, maybe can't afford to take, basically your college programs, and yet want to go to college. So we have to help people in some way to finance those. We've got student loans available to people. We've got grants depending upon your income levels. And this is just another way of helping people. In other words, if in fact you take certain, if you're gonna get build up certain credits, you're gonna take certain courses, then you build up, in a sense, an obligation of community service, so that when you get out of school, you then are obligated to spend a certain amount of time basically paying off by working at some place. Now, the danger that people were concerned about here was that we might end up with a tremendous bureaucracy in place to administer all of this. So is it, is that the best way to provide an alternative way of paying for a college education? And that was really what was, that's one of the issues that is of interest to people is whether we're going to in fact create a situation where the bureaucracy that gets built up is worse than the problem itself.
The concept seems good though. That
Yeah.
somebody would do some public service, which everybody should anyways, and benefit whoever they're servicing, and then in return get some financial assistance.
Right. Right.
How about I got a whole bunch of topics here, and we're running close to time. How about crime? It seems that a lot of people are moving out of the cities and all the urban areas into the suburbs, and I don't know if you want to say it's a coincidence or if they're actually bringing the crime with them, because it seems like crime is increased unbelievably in the area. Like Rockville, a little while ago, there was some gang violence in Rockville. I was like, when I grew up as a kid, Rockville was just a hick town.
Right. Well, we're seeing that all over eastern Connecticut. There is no place really that you can say that is immune to that kind of a problem. I mean, there was recently last year there was a murder in Willimantic, a gangland-style murder where I think a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old was shot a couple of times through the head in gangland style and left behind a dumpster in Willimantic. Same sort of thing happened in New London, where a young man was shot in the lobby of a public housing apartment building and killed. And this is happening. There was some a drive-by shooting in Middletown. There was, and these things are happening all around the district. I think part of the problem is that we really haven't we have a criminal justice system that has failed, and when people just do not view that they're going to get punished if they're caught. If they do get caught and they get a sentence, they're not going to have to serve but a very small portion of it. Even if they commit a crime that warrants the death penalty, it's 12, 14 years before it ever gets imposed, if ever, and it just doesn't happen. So people, I'm in favor of what's called the causing people to have truth in sentencing, I guess it's called, and what that says is that when you get a sentence, it's expected you're going to serve that sentence, not 30, a third of it or a quarter of it, but you're going to serve the full sentence. I mean, when you hear somebody got 20 years, darn well they're going to be out in 6 or 7. Yeah. And if that's what they're supposed to be serving, then in fact we ought not be kidding anybody by telling people it's a 20-year sentence. It's not.
Right. But the problem with that is then the prisons get even more overcrowded than they are now.
Well, it's interesting that some statistics seem to be showing that about 7% of the criminals commit 70% of the crime. So if you can identify the repeat offenders and lock them up, you can reduce the amount of you can get hold of a lot of the crime. You can get control of a lot of the crime and keep it off the streets. But right now, the prisoners seem to be in control of the prisons. You hear about the gangs in prison. What the heck is there a gang in prison for? Yeah. Why does that exist? It ought not exist, clearly.
Yeah. For example, the Carl Robinson, the riot they just had a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
They're talking about rival gangs within the prison. It doesn't even compute. It doesn't make sense to me that they should allow that to happen. And the reason, one of the things I guess is that it's going on is that we have these prisons now, which are more or less dormitory style, where there aren't cells. There are people living in almost like dorm type rooms, and they have hall monitors. A couple of prison guards who are unarmed, who are responsible for the maintenance of order among as many as 120 different prisoners. I certainly wouldn't want that job.
No. It seems like when I grew up that you think of prison, you think of, if you do something wrong, you're going to go to prison, and you'll be like locked up in a little tiny cell with no light and, no food, no water. But now they're treated like they're at a resort or something.
Well, it certainly is. It's not what we would normally think of as prison.
Right.
It doesn't have the impact on people that we might have thought that it would have had. And in fact, the image is that people are in fact treated very nicely in prison, or that things aren't quite as bad as others might envision them to be. There's educational opportunities, rooms to go work out in, television, all kinds of opportunities for prisoners. In some cases, you might say, well, it's easier to get an education by getting a prison sentence than it is by trying to go to college and pay for it.
It's true. We better wrap things up here. Now, when is the election going to be?
Okay, the election is, of course, in November, and this year it's November 8th. And I would encourage people who might like to get involved. I say to people that it's important that we get people who are productive in society, effective in government. In other words, let's take people who are really doing something with their lives and get them involved in government, because if we don't, you just imagine what we're going to end up with. We got career politicians who have never really worked a job in their life. I think it's extremely important that we get good people involved in government. And I encourage people at all levels to get involved, whether it's on your local planning and zoning board, or you're in a wetlands commission, your board of education, even if it means getting out and voting and doing your civic responsibility by recognizing, trying to learn something about what's going on and getting involved in the process in some way, working on a campaign. And for that, if you don't mind, I'd like to give a phone number and say to people that if you'd like to get involved in my campaign, please call 346-1666. That's my campaign headquarters. And we love to take volunteers. We've got lots of projects for them to get involved in. And I think it's all part of the process of trying to improve this whole thing we call government.
Okay. I was just going to say something, but okay, that just about wraps it up. We'll return. If you have any questions for Ed Munster, you can give us a call at 456-2164. We'll take one or two calls, and we'll return in just a moment after the Violent Femmes. And New Times. Can you hear it? Okay. WECS, Willimantic, and that was the Violent Femmes with the New Times. And we have a caller on the line who would like to ask Ed Munster a question. Hello, ECS, you're on the air.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Hi, we're just turning around the radio here. We're down here in Norwich, and we're actually discussing some politics that we happen to come across the station here. And the debate going on right now on the health care issue, do you think there really is a health care crisis? Or obviously there are people that are don't have medical coverage and there are gaps, but is it at a crisis level? And what's your take on that? And how would you vote on the current bills down there?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing right now is about every couple of days, there's a new bill out there.
Right.
And it seems like the crisis is that Bill Clinton wants to get a bill through the Congress at all costs. And it doesn't seem to matter. Right now, he's embracing all sorts of things. Apparently, he sees that as a defining issue for his basically his term in office, and he wants to make sure that something gets passed. I think he's really afraid that what's going to happen is that if in fact something doesn't get passed in these sort of waning weeks of the existing Congress, that the next Congress may have such a changed complexion that he may not be able to get what he wants through the Congress. And so he's trying to push through anything at any cost through the Congress. So I do recognize that there is a crisis in health care in the sense that costs have gone out of control, and we've got to bring it under control. I know that there are people who suffer without having health care insurance. Many people, the poorest, the poor people who are basically on general assistance get their health care through Medicaid. The elderly are taken care of through Medicare. And there are about 15% of Americans who right now do not have health care for one reason or another. sometimes some of those people, I won't say many of them or all of them, but some of those people are folks who choose not to purchase health care insurance because they feel that they're healthy. Many times they're young people who simply don't have a job that provides health care, and they can't see spending the money necessary to get health care insurance because they think that they're healthy and they're not going to have a problem. Unfortunately, hopefully most of the time that they're absolutely right. They're taking a gamble that's correct. Unfortunately, from time to time, they do get themselves into a health problem, and then they can't afford to pay, and then the rest of us in society have to pay. So that, in fact, I think most people are getting health care from one mechanism or another, but not necessarily through channels that we'd like to see them using.
So as I understand it, what is your position, more or less, for the private sector to do it, or that perhaps government doesn't belong in the healthcare business at all? Or?
Right. Well, I don't believe that we need a government bureaucracy basically determining what our health care is going to be. I would much rather see a private sector solution, and the one that I have been supportive of for at least the past 2.5 years is a plan that is sometimes described as a medical IRA, or a medical care account. The idea being here that we put people in charge of the money that's going to be spent on their health care. Exactly what happens right now. For example, if you go to a doctor and he tells you you're going to need some sort of a procedure done, you ask him, well, how much is that going to cost, doc? Normally what he does is he picks up your chart, notices whether you have insurance or not. If you've got insurance, he says, don't worry, your insurance is going to pay for it. Now, if the patient doesn't have to worry about what the cost is, and the doctor doesn't have to worry about the cost because he knows he's going to get paid because the insurance is going to cover it, who is there to worry about what the costs are? My contention is the third payer payments have in fact been a problem in terms of driving health care costs up, because neither the guy who's getting the service nor the one who's providing it has any interest in controlling the cost. So we have to get people in charge of the dollars that are being spent for their health care, and that's happening, or that can happen, if in fact we allow as an option for health care coverage this medical IRA concept. And you need that plus a catastrophic health insurance policy to cover cost above and beyond the medical IRA coverage. You also need to have tort reform to limit pain and suffering claims for liability. You need to have, and in fact, what this process will do is to reduce the amount of paperwork involved in healthcare claims, because the individual will simply have to justify, if he's audited, that in fact he's spent the money in his medical IRA for medical purposes. When you make a claim to an insurance company right now for an office visit that might be, say, a $50 or a $75 office visit, that the cost of, if you will, just processing that paperwork can sometimes be as much as the bill itself. So we add a tremendous amount of processing cost to the medical bill, which is the total picture that we're looking at. The other thing, of course, is that if you limit malpractice, as I was suggesting earlier, on pain and suffering, you can reduce not only the cost due to malpractice suits, but you also limit the amount that of sort of preventative, not preventative, but of defensive medicine that doctors are performing. We've got to give people the incentive to stay healthy and to save money, and to be concerned about the cost of their health care. And I believe that the private sector solution is the way to go.
It seems that maybe Bill Clinton made a promise in the campaign and feels like he has to live up to it, but it seems like he's trying to tackle too much. Maybe if he went for something maybe preventive health care instead of just all-out health care, maybe that would work instead.
One more quick question in here.
Sure.
Term limits. What's your position on term limits? And,
Well,
do you agree with them?
I have taken the pledge to support any term limit, to support term limit proposals. Philosophically, I think that we should be able to vote for anyone we want to for Congress, including somebody who's been in there for many, many years. However, the problem is that the advantage that incumbents have made it impossible for us to get rid of them. So the only practical solution is going to be through term limits, and so I support term limits. I don't think anyone should serve in the Congress for more than, let's say, 12 years, 2 terms in the U.S. Senate or 6 terms in the U.S. House, because otherwise it becomes impossible to get new ideas into the Congress and to get rid of some of the deadwood that's there that just continues to not be responsive to the people of their district.
You touched on tort reform. Are you an attorney?
No, I'm not.
Well, that's in your favor. Would you support tort reform as far as product liability in other areas than medical practice, such as aviation or
right.
So many areas?
Right. I'm quite in fact, while I'm not a pilot, I know people who own small airplanes, and they're telling me right now that they can't even get new manufactured parts for their airplanes because of the basically the liability that the manufacturers are being hung on with respect to parts that might at some point fail as much as 25 years later.
Right. Piper's being sued for accidents with the Piper Cub that was made in 1940. They can't get that out from around their neck. Of course, the company's Chapter 11.
No, we have to have some reasonable tort reform so that we can get some of the basically the litigiousness of our society. I mean, the propensity to sue has just been so great that it seems like if anything happens, somebody's looking for somebody with deep pockets to go after, and it's really discouraging lots of economic activity. And it's if a person has a legitimate complaint about a problem that has occurred, which is really where the manufacturer is at fault, fine, they should have the right to sue. But there has to be some reasonableness associated with it, and you cannot trust the courts to that right now. We need some legislation to help define what should be going on.
Well, very good. Well, I'll let you go, and maybe you could just touch on foreign affairs. Haiti seems to be at the top of the subject these days as far as an impending invasion and so forth. But do you think our presence as a country globally should be maintained? Should we, for example, support Bosnia, Herzegovina, places like that? And, of course, we were in Somalia not too long ago and so forth, or more or less be isolationist to some extent as we were in the past. And I'll kind of hang up and listen to you.
Okay.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm really concerned about is that we should not become, I don't think we should become isolationist. On the other hand, our foreign policy has been one which has been wavering all over the place, and we're never sure what it is that is really going to is meant by a U.S. Policy statement. It seems to change and from week to week and day to day even. Now, one of the things that I'm really concerned about is the sovereignty of the United States with respect to commitment of our troops to any kind of an action. I really, I think that it's important that we have, if you will, among our allies, agreement that something needs to be done, and that if in fact we go into something, we go into it with commitment of at least understanding from other people that this is a proper action. On the other hand, to have U.S. troops under the command, if you will, of generals or officials from other countries is something that I'm not as happy with as I might be. Let's put it that way.
Okay, we'll have room for one more call at 456-2164, and then we'll wrap everything up. Keeping you past, told you an hour, but
it's been good. I've enjoyed it.
Good. We'll return right after this public service announcement with Ed
We share a single music
and dance to a common beat.
freedom.
It's a human music.
One we all can feel.
As members of the human family,
we share a spirit deeper than color.
A humanity larger than borders.
That's why it's hard to stand silent.
As our brothers, our sisters,
and our children all over the world
are tortured, imprisoned,
executed,
or disappeared.
Simply for their identity.
All for peacefully expressing their beliefs.
Every day, we at Amnesty International
speak out
to protect the basic human rights of peaceful people everywhere.
To create a voice for humanity that's heard
all over the world.
To change the sounds of suffering
to the sounds of freedom. Raise your voice.
Call 1-800-AMNESTY
and join Amnesty International.
It's your human right.
1-800-AMNESTY.
We also have a lot of humorous public service announcements here, but that was one of the more serious ones. Just one last question. I was wondering, did you have a debate with Congressman Gagenson at the last election in '92?
Well, it's interesting. We had offered, in fact, we asked for a series of debates 2 years ago, and Congressman never responded to us directly. He responded by putting out a press release saying when he was going to debate us. It was sort of an arrogant kind of a way to approach things, where he wasn't interested in talking with us and dealing with us about when we were going to debate, but he wanted to do it on his own time schedule, and this is the way it was going to be, kind of a thing. We ended up having a number of opportunities where we talked on the same shows or we talked on the same stage. And it was interesting that this time he's now asking to do this, and we're pleased that he's finally responded and said he wants to debate. So we're looking forward to the opportunity.
So you already have something set up?
Yeah, we're gonna. We're in the process of negotiating. Yeah.
Okay. We have one last caller. WECS, you're on the air. You have a question for Ed Munster?
Yes, I do. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, hi. Listen, I got two very quick questions. I'll hang up after I ask them. I'll listen for your answer. Number one, do you think that abortion should be covered in any health care reform legislation? And number two, are you in favor of continuing funding for future Seawolf submarines? Thank you, Mr. Munster.
Okay, thank you. All right. On the first question, the abortion issue is a very tough issue. Lots of people on both sides of it, and I respect their opinion. I have to say that I have been pro-choice. I do believe that abortions which are needed for medical reasons ought to be covered under, essentially under any if there were any national health insurance program to be passed, I would have no problem with abortions being covered if, in fact, they're medically required. On the other hand, I don't believe that abortions which are basically birth control related, just essentially as a method of birth control, ought to come under that same kind of funding.
But say if a woman was raped, perhaps?
Well, I think that's a possibility, yeah. I mean, I think some of these things are up for discussion and debate, but primarily normal, if you will...
Someone forgets to wear a condom and they get pregnant and they say, oh, we'll just go to the government, they'll give us an abortion.
Yeah, I have a problem with that.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see, the second issue was... Okay.
I totally forget now.
Oh, jeez. We're going to take...
I should have written it down.
I have to apologize to the caller for that. I hope he'll call us right back.
Yeah, you can call us at 456-2164.
He had such a hot topic on the first one. We got... There he is. Thank you.
We'll put you right on the air. ECS, you're on the air.
Hi. I'm not the caller that it was before, but it was a Seawolf.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. The issue with respect to the Seawolf is that, of course, we're talking about the second and third Seawolf. The first one is fully, there's no debate on that one. I support funding for both the second and the third Seawolf. And the reason that I say that is that there are several things that are going on. One of them has to do with the issue of whether we can defend the need for the sea wolf from a use, whether we need it for the defense of our country. And I've been working with a group of basically military people and defense contractors who have demonstrated to my satisfaction that in fact the sea wolf is useful from that point of view, and we do need to have it. But from a second point of view, there's a certain amount of technology that is required in terms of massive of people who can build submarines. We only have really two places in the country that build submarines right now. One of them is Newport News and Dry Dock down in Virginia, and the other is here in Groton. If in fact we dismantle the building of submarines altogether, and then 6 years from now or 10 years from now, the world situation with, say, someone like North Korea or some other place starts to explode, and we have to put together the people who can do this kind of work, it's not going to be possible. It's in any kind of a time frame. And the new attack submarine, which was called the Centurion, is really under discussion. In fact, we're talking about funding for the engineering work that has to be done for those. The production probably would not start until around the turn of the century. That continuing to develop the skills and the research necessary in order to build those submarines is really an ongoing process. And if we were to chop off the sea wolves at this point, we would lose that development process, the technology build-up process. And so that's some of the reasons why I support the sea wolf.
Okay, we'll get to one last caller here, and WECS, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi there.
Yeah, I'm just calling to find out, do you know if they're going to play the Latin freestyle music on after this?
What's that?
Do you know if they're going to play Latin freestyle music after this?
No, I'm sorry. Okay. Not the proper question we wanted, but...
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so there will be work for EB in the future. It's just not to the degree that we already have.
That's correct, and I think that it's going to happen. That we need to maintain our defenses. We cannot assume that because the Cold War is over that there aren't still some problems out there.
Okay. WECS, you're on the air.
Yeah, good evening. You got time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Munster, I have one question for you.
Sure enough.
Okay. Are you in favor of reforming the way campaigns are financed now? Would you like to see the government finance campaigns, or would you like to see some changes in the way that campaigns are financed? You know, like Sam Gejdenson getting I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Indians. You probably get nothing from. Would you like to see something changed in the way the campaigns are run, the way they're financed?
Right. I'd be happy to talk about that issue.
Beautiful.
Okay. Okay. First of all, it's one of the major problems in the way that campaigns are financed is that there's no requirement that a person solicit money from his own district. Now, it's well known that, and I have the data to back it up, that Mr. Gagenson gets most of his money from out of state, and to me, there ought to be a requirement that at least 50% of your money come from within your own district, or at least within your own state. Because otherwise, how do you stay connected with the concerns of your district if you don't have to get out there and try to campaign and raise monies among those people?
But they're supposed to be here to represent us.
And not, you follow the money to find out where the guy's interests are.
Right.
And if he's getting most of his money from someplace else, that's probably where he's voting. And so that's a major issue for me, and I think that the money ought to come from the district, at least a heavy portion of it ought to. Now, in terms of whether I would like to see government financing of campaigns, I would say no, because quite frankly, as a taxpayer, I don't want to see my money going to support somebody that I'm opposed to.
Right.
Because I don't want to see, you know, I certainly don't want to see my taxes going to support Sam Gejdenson. I don't want to see my taxes going to support Dan Rostenkowski. So I think that, you know, the government financed, right now the government is financing all of his mailings, his franking privileges at this point in time. So I can't see a government-financed campaign. I don't think it's right, and I would oppose it.
All right. I appreciate you coming down here tonight, and I'd like to thank you and wish you all the best of luck on November 8th, you said?
November 8th.
That's when the election is. Even if, you know, you don't vote for him, you want to vote for someone else, that's your right. But please, get out and vote. It is your privilege, and that's about it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed being here this evening, and look forward to we're going to have an exciting campaign over the next 3 months. So let's get people involved.
All right. Thank you, Ed Munster. We'll return after this song.